Thank you everybody for joining the session today. Today's webinar will focus on illustrating transportation business analytics and business intelligence, featuring our partners at Invista Corp. Just quick housekeeping, logistics to talk through. Obviously, all attendees will be on mute for the webinar. If you do have any questions, please provide those in the question area of the GoToWebinar user interface. We will get to a Q&A session at the end, but feel free to ask your questions during the session as well too. Quick introductions. Joining myself today is Michael Falls and Bill Schroeder. Quick introduction for myself, Tony Barrow, member of the sales and solutions team here at ProShip, working with our enterprise shippers and strategic accounts. Why don't you start, Michael? You want to give a quick introduction to your background with Invista?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Yeah, and thank you to the ProShip team for inviting me to be part of today's conversation. I'm really looking forward to it, and thanks to you for attending. Michael Falls, I'm the Director of Global Strategic Solutions at Invista. For those of you who aren't familiar with our company, Invista has been around since 2002 as a global technology and consulting firm that really delivers digital and physical solutions, not only within the supply chain space, but really enabling all of enterprise commerce. So my role is specifically within our freight audit and payment solution. I'm a director in that group, and I help lead our transportation BI, our data analytics, all things systems integrations, and our transportation finance. So really, in terms of today's conversation on the topic of BI, my team has really been kind of at the forefront of helping to transform Invista's product over the last few years from what I would call kind of a business information tool into the market's leading transportation business intelligence product. And so that's really what I'm excited to talk about here today.
Great, thanks. Bill, you want to give a quick introduction to yourself as we kick it off?
Yeah, yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Schrader. I'm the president of ProShip, and I'm honored to be here with Michael and the Invista team and the expertise that they bring to the table with all of our webinars. Really appreciate everyone being here today. I think you'll find that this session is really going to have some good, solid meat in it. There's a lot of information to go through and a lot of challenges that we're facing. With this team of experts that we have here, as well as myself, we bring decades of transportation and logistics experience to the table here. And the last year and a half has been challenging, to say the least. And hopefully what we're bringing to you in information in this case is solutions to some of those problems that we've been facing. Personally, I've spent the last 25 years working in transportation, logistics, supply chain technologies specifically, and in those technologies specializing in parcel transportation and carrier logistics and how that all gets interfaced to the rest of the operation in the business. So hopefully we can provide you with some good, valuable information in the hour that we have ahead of us. So Tony?
Great, thanks, Bill. And as Bill alluded to, we do have quite a meaty agenda here to get through. So really to break it down over the next maybe 45 minutes to an hour or so, we'll really kind of have three major parts that we'll talk through. So obviously setting some context for analytics in today's supply chain, and how we got here will certainly be the intro to the session here. The evolution of transportation analytics and business intelligence. The second third will really dive into that end state to bring all of your transportation data together, how that impacts your business, your operations, and then obviously best practices to implement these tools into your organization. Then the third, we'll really talk through measuring the impact of analytics on your operation, and we'll get into the overview of ProShip and Invista and our partnership and solution integration, as well as the Q&A to answer any of your questions to round out the discussion today. So really kicking things off, Bill, could you walk us through, what we've all been living through the last 18, 24 months, and just some of the
Yeah.
painful.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time dwelling on the problems and challenges that we faced. We all know what they are. We live with them every day, and there's umpteen other surveys out there and kind of polls that have been done, as well as the statistics around the challenges that the supply chain's facing today, and that's well covered. What we're trying to bring to you here is, the strategies that you've incorporated in the last year. How do you manage them? How do you actually continue to execute and optimize your transportation strategy with some of the changes that you've probably put in place, and then some of the changes that are being forced upon us with the carriers. So if you look at the parcel network today, there's, the three big carriers, USPS, UPS, and FedEx. And of those, two of them have implemented a whole slew of new surcharges, accessorial charges. They've imposed restrictions on volume and capacity, and they've actually terminated some customers. That's because supply simply is outpacing demand by probably 3 to 5 years minimum. That has put the regionals into a whole new position. If you look at the regionals that we had before, they managed to eke out a living specializing in specific lanes of transportation, and they came and went and they merged and they did all kinds of stuff. I would say this is the year that they've gained critical mass. This year, ProShip has enabled more regional carriers for more customers than in any year prior. The demand is huge. We've created in the last year 19 new carrier integrations to support those additional regional players, as well as some of the global players. And all of that is giving you alternatives to the national carriers. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, one or two carrier strategy was sufficient for most businesses. You'd renegotiate your contract maybe once a year, maybe once every 3 years, depending on what you signed up for. You pretty much forgot about it for the next year or three. That's not a strategy that's viable today. You're evaluating alternative carriers, you're looking at regionals, you might even be looking at some of the deliv and ship it, job or gig economy type carriers to move some of your ship from store volume. You're looking for every kind of option you can have to successfully provide your customer with a great experience and at the same time manage your costs. So that's what we're going to dive into with this. How do you navigate through the dynamic surcharges and optimize your transportation spend so that you can ensure you're doing it the most effective way possible? 10 years ago, you could manage all this on a spreadsheet. You'd have a dashboard, a couple charts, you'd run a monthly report, you'd look at how the carriers were performing, you might reconcile it with your invoice, file a few money back guarantees for some late deliveries, and you went about your day managing your operations, right? Today, that's not the case. And we have Michael here, who is probably the world's foremost expert in this very defined area where your parcel invoices and your delivery experience for your customer and the actual execution of those shipments all intersect. And that's the nexus of everything a warehouse operation or a fulfillment operation does. If you can't get it out the door and to your customer when and where they expect it, you're not succeeding. Now, if you can do that and manage your costs, you're probably looking at a very successful career. So I'm going to pass it over to Michael, a good friend and colleague of mine. I respect his opinion greatly. I talk to him quite frequently. And hopefully I didn't swell his head too much, but Michael, we're going to give you the floor and let your expertise shine. So please.
Yeah, no, world's foremost expert is quite an attribute to live up to. So I'll try to accept the challenge here.
Show me one with more expertise.
So from a state of the industry perspective, I mean, Bill, that was an outstanding job of kind of providing the context of where we are in the marketplace. This slide really focuses on the state of the industry as it relates to data analytics. Like Bill said, a decade ago, you could manage all of what you would think of as the necessary analytics in a spreadsheet, right? And today the term is it's business intelligence. It's all about how do I acquire business intelligence and move from the data that I have to action. And the theme really that I'll harp on throughout the conversation today is that data analytics, it's really just all about optimization. It's this reality that we know that as transportation operators and in transportation finance, really throughout the supply chain space, we are always operating suboptimally in multiple arenas, right? We're operating suboptimally when it comes to our spend. We always know there's opportunities to reduce our spend and to manage our costs better. We're operating suboptimally when it comes to our transit time, right? There's the constant pursuit of faster delivery to better serve our customers. And then we know we're operating suboptimally when it comes to our workforce. We know that our teams are doing non-value added activity throughout the course of their work days. And we want to eliminate that and empower them to do what's most valuable, because frankly, like Bill just outlined, there are too many important challenges to face to be operating suboptimally. So we know this is a constant and ongoing challenge that we face. And so from a state of the industry perspective, the reason why data analytics is important is that unless you can wrap your arms around all of the data that's available at your disposal, and then leverage a tool, a product, a team that really empowers you to take action upon it, you can't get out of this kind of suboptimal hole. So I think that the graphic on the screen really does a nice job of kind of communicating really just how elevated this topic is right now. This was actually from Gartner a couple of years ago, the user needs and wants survey that Gartner puts out specific to technology users. And the question they posed was, is your supply chain organization currently investing in or planning to invest in any of these areas, right? And as you can see kind of at the top of the list, advanced analytics and big data was either already adopted or in the process of being adopted or budgeted for by 85% of respondents. And the key call out there is that's pre-pandemic, right? So we're moving towards 100% of supply chain and transportation practitioners moving towards saying, hey, I want data analytics and I want business intelligence. And the reason why is the list of problems that we have bulleted on the screen. And I don't need to read these to you. Every organization I've ever spoken with has these problems, right? And so I'd encourage you to do an inventory and ask which of these problems do you face, right? Is it that you feel data rich, information poor, right? That expression, DRIP, data rich, information poor. I have so much data available at my disposal, but I haven't been able to turn it into actionable information yet. And maybe the reason why is the disparate data systems, right? Maybe it's I've got a purchase order management system, a TMS, a WMS, an OMS, an ERP, got all of these systems that all have data, but there's limited connectivity. They're disparate. They maybe each have their own BI kind of product embedded or dashboards or visibility tools embedded. And so the challenge becomes, how do I actually use all of these tools? How do I use the data? It's hard to adopt from a change management perspective. It's hard to get people in your organization to adopt products even once you do have them. And sometimes they're inflexible. Like you can't get the value out of them. If you're a multi-brand company or you have multiple fulfillment channels, and the visibility tool is just kind of this out-of-the-box solution that doesn't allow you to slice and dice by channel or brand or node or kind of whatever your KPI and business case is, then the data and the product that you have doesn't allow you to optimize in the way that we talked about. So this is really just setting the stage. And there's a very key point kind of before we move on that I want to make sure is made here, because every person who is part of this conversation right now has a different perception of what business intelligence is. And I think it's very important that we all have common ground for what BI is, because BI in transportation, it's a term that gets thrown around all the time. And I want to make very clear that business information is not business intelligence. It's a very key point for framing the conversation. The difference between information and intelligence is that information it's knowledge. Information is knowledge, it's indicators. Intelligence is knowledge applied, right? It's taking that knowledge turning it into action. And so when we talk about data analytics and we talk about visibility, dashboard products that exist today in our space as transportation practitioners, they usually provide really valuable information, but that's visibility, that's knowledge, right? Business intelligence has to empower shippers to be able to take optimal action steps, again, to reduce spend, to improve transit time, to better support their customers, and then ultimately to optimize your workforce. So we'll kind of maintain that theme throughout the conversation. Great. So quick kind of overview of the evolution of technology in effective transportation strategies. As Tony and Bill and I were kind of having the conversation preparing for today, it really occurred to us that BI has kind of rapidly evolved, or I guess the journey of shippers in really wrapping their arms around all of their data and moving towards BI has really evolved in 4 very unique ways. And to Bill's point, it's really happened rapidly. Bill, I think you said it was a decade ago that the shippers could manage all of their activity in a single spreadsheet. And part of that's just that volume has shifted, especially for e-com shippers. But certainly just the complexity and the amount of data available and data elements available has shifted as well. And we just have better tools, right? And it hasn't, for a lot of shippers, it hasn't necessarily been a decade. It's only been a journey of the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm talking with shippers on a daily basis where that's still happening today, right? We're still downloading reports from carrier websites and manipulating them in Excel. And that is how we get visibility today. So there are many shippers, and probably some who are part of the conversation today, where that's still your reality. And if that's the case, the good news is there are solutions that are low lift and easy to implement that can get you from where you are today to kind of a much more optimal state. But really that journey.
So Michael, yeah. That's a great point. Every one of the carriers, like for example, FedEx, which I'm very familiar with, has insights. You have online dashboards. You can watch and manage your FedEx business. While I think they're trying or attempting to offer solutions and tools to manage your interaction with them, I think they've actually complicated the problem. Because now I have a set of tracking data and reports that I download from UPS and one from FedEx, and then I have my USPS business and perhaps a couple regionals, Lone Star or On Track or one of those. I have all these different reports, all different formats, all different invoices. They have accessorial charges and service levels that I have a hard time comparing. So I have all the information. I have everything I need. Every carrier is great at providing me their slice of the data. But that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for a lot of reasons. I mean, number one is that it's just not normalized across all of the carriers, right? And across all of the modes. So to the point you made kind of on the last slide, Bill, if you're employing a multi-carrier strategy or a multimodal strategy, you're using regional carriers. I mean, now you've just got all of these data sources that they're not normalized. They don't have the same data elements, and there's no unifying intelligence or product built around them. So you're right, it creates really more problems and more complexities for the shipper to solve. And it really limits your ability to grow your network as well, because you know that every time you introduce a new mode, a new carrier, you're having to solve this problem all over again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, the journey really from what we would call, I guess, phase 1 to phase 4, and there will probably be a phase 5 and phase 6 by this time, in 2022 or 2023. But phase 1 of BI was really just based around visibility, right? A few years ago, it was enough to just say, hey, if I can get my arms around my data and I can see all of my transportation activity with my costs, my weights, my service levels, that's enough. We've moved into a world, or we recently moved into a world, phase 2, that we would maybe call the spend management phase of data analytics, where the goal of every shipper was, how do I reduce cost? And a lot of that was corporate pressure and not understanding how vital supply chain and transportation practitioners were in achieving the ultimate business strategy. This was before it became common to have chief logistics officers, chief supply chain officers. Really, there was just pressure on transportation operators, and particularly reduce your costs as much as possible. And where we really started to move from phase 2 of data analytics into phase 3 is that businesses started to realize how critical supply chain is in being a strategic partner in delighting the customer and really achieving the business objectives, right? And driving profitability, right? So it not only being seen as a cost center, but being seen as a profit center as well. And so that's where we really moved into phase 3.0 of performance, right? How do I better perform from a transit time perspective, serve my customers, meet our business commitments? And we've seen this play out where a couple of years ago even, right? I mean, most of the folks on this call are going to be familiar with the concept of money back guarantees, where a shipper will reimburse service level commitments if a package is delivered late, reimburse the freight costs associated with the shipment. A few years ago, we would hear shippers say all the time, hey, I don't mind if my shipment is late because it means I get the cost of my freight reimbursed. And today, nobody is saying that, right? It's almost shifted into a world where the performance is more important than the cost management. So phase 4 is really, if we can achieve, BI phase 2, BI phase 3, phase 4 is really where we can start to accelerate progress. Because if we can optimize our workforce, meaning eliminate all of the non-value added activity from our associates' workday, because they don't actually have to manipulate data, they don't have to download reports, they actually have all of the intelligence available at their disposal to make good business decisions and act upon it. And that's really where we take phase 2, phase 3, we wrap the bow around them, and we're really humming when it comes to BI and data analytics as a way of truly optimizing your transportation operations in your network. So the last thing I'll say is just that the band kind of over to the right on the slide here, it's got to be in all 4 of these areas, right? It's got to be in strategic sourcing and in planning your carrier relationships and your agreements. It's got to be on the shipment execution side, downstream with the freight and parcel audit and all things carrier billing, and with payment, right? If we're not hitting all 4 of those areas, then we don't have a comprehensive data analytics and BI strategy. We're only tackling a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, thanks for the overview, Michael. I think one of the next slides we want to talk through is I guess, how do you get to that intelligence state, right? We've talked through organizing data, having it available to you, but there certainly is a difference between the dashboards that's available for your team and then enacting on what you may find in an analytics tool. Could you just maybe delve into kind of BI versus dashboards here as the next part of the conversation as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so again, really that concept that when a lot of people talk about BI, it's really apparent that they're talking about business information and not business intelligence. And I think this screenshot here, which is from Envista's transportation BI product, is a great illustration of the difference between information and intelligence. So what you're looking at is a few different graphics. You're going to see some KPIs on your left, right? So these are things like total spend, cost per shipment. Total spend and cost per shipment are indicators. They are information. They're useful. Okay. What you see over to the right is what we would call a heat map or a heat chart. And it basically includes down the y-axis a list of service levels, and across the x-axis a list of parcel zones 2 through 8. And the numbers in the middle represent average transit times for this particular shipper. So this is a real shipper. You're looking at normalized data. And what you can see, it may be hard to see the graphic, but what you can see if you look at the lines for the ground service level and the 2-day service level, you're going to see that average transit times for zones 2 and 3 for this shipper are actually quicker shipping ground than shipping 2-day. And obviously there's a cost benefit associated with downgrading from an express service to a ground or a standard service. And we'd actually be improving the performance time to better serve our customers, right? So from a routing guide or a shipment execution software perspective, this is really the key, right? Because there's shipment execution software is going to say, hey, if we need to get it there in 2 days, maybe we've got to use the 2-day service. But if we know that from a carrier perspective, for this particular shipper based on their network, it's actually arriving more quickly with ground and we could cut our costs by half, then obviously we might want to take a look at rethinking our execution logic. And the intelligence that's built right into our product here is, you can see on the left, not only do we have the indicators around spend and cost per shipment, but there's actually a calculator that says if we were to shift all of that volume from 2-day to ground, it would actually cut $125,000 out of our network based on the previous 12 months data. So it is information. You've got to have the information component, but it's information that becomes intelligence because now we can take action upon it.
Yeah, this is, Michael, thank you. This is actually an amazing dashboard. Don't know a whole lot about business intelligence versus business information, but what I see here is we've actually distilled it down, and there's a very clear call to action in it. The data is just pointing you in exactly the right direction, saying you need to do something here. You're spending too much money. Now, could this apply to even more carriers? It seems like this one's pretty simple. Maybe a few national carriers are in the mix, and it hasn't even really incorporated, you know, what is typical today is maybe 2 regionals, 5 or 6 DCs for a large retail shipper, dispersed around the country. And there's been, you know, a number of different regional carriers, but the big shift has also been ship from store. So there's a lot of variables and strategies that people are changing and shifting. How do you address that? How did a continuously shifting mix of carriers and origins and destinations? It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is. So my first response, that's a really good question, Bill. I mean, my first response to that question is that intelligence has to be flexible enough to account for what you're describing. So from a fulfillment channel perspective, I mean, let's take this dashboard as an example. I've got to be able to understand, not just in a vacuum with all of my spend encompassed, but specifically by fulfillment channel, what is the story that the data tells? Because if I filter or I slice and dice this by, let's say, direct to consumer, as opposed to ship from store, as opposed to, you know, inbound volume, wholesale, I mean, you've got to look at it at each of those levels, and you have to look at it by node. If I've got an East Coast DC and a West Coast DC, is this story applying to both of them or just one of them, right? So there's all sorts of factors involved. So the challenge that needs to be overcome, and the hurdle that you need to jump as a shipper in selecting a BI product is the tool flexible enough to do all of that slicing and dicing? Because Bill, it's a great point. If I'm a shipper and I come in here and it's all of my spend that feeds this graphic, it actually doesn't help me a lot. It's not a quick call to action because I still have to do so many analytics. But if I can quickly apply those 3 filters to my to what I know about my business, then I can very easily target and make specific business decisions in specific areas of my network.
Yeah, I know we're not going to dive into actually your tool. I mean, it's a general discussion, but if anyone in the audience is interested, Michael's going to be live and in person at our Converge event in Florida in September. There's an informational webinar on that tomorrow. If you're not signed up for it now, please do. We'll just give you an overview of that. So Michael, I'll let it go back to you and you can roll on through the slides. I know we still have a lot to get through here.
Well, I think I'll pause on what you had mentioned, Michael, you know, aligning your analytics by sales channel or by, you know, fulfillment channel. I think a lot of that comes back to, you know, how we deploy from a Proship perspective in organizing, you know, the business logic that would actually be modified or changed in those calls to action. So we'll get into the best practices, getting into implementation and setting the stage for a successful implementation. But I think aligning those fulfillment channels, it's a good point that you make, Michael, as far as, you know, your business rules through multi-carrier software like Proship will align for, you know, quick changes to the business for what analytics can uncover within those sales channels as well. And I think that's into our kind of next conversation. You know, how do you bring it all together, right? What are you know, in an advanced deployment, I guess, what are all the moving parts that need to be synchronized here? Could you maybe dive into how Envista has kind of, you know, captured all of these different moving parts and maybe break them down for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, this concept of advanced transportation optimization and management, it's really how we think about being a strategic partner to a shipper in every facet of their transportation operations. So the kind of the wheel that we showed previously, where we talk about strategic sourcing across all modes of transportation globally, through execution, right? Helping to partner with a pro ship to be able to optimize shipment execution software through the use of visibility and analytics, processing global freight bills across all modes, and then helping to optimize payment solutions, really being one partner in all of those areas, right? And so the highlight from my perspective here is that when talking about data analytics, right, and I think the reality is that most shippers understand that to kind of, again, optimize their analytics journey, they'll need a strategic partner. And that strategic partner might be internal or it might be external, right? There are companies right now that are going down an internal journey of enterprise data warehouse, right? Let's get all of our data into one platform from a corporate perspective. And there are internal partners from kind of an internal business intelligence practice that are helping to implement that software and hopefully shine some light on transportation spend. And then in the majority of cases, there's also this reality of having an external partner who can come alongside and help optimize solutions and provide a product. And so, when I think about, again, this concept of Atom, I think both of those scenarios I just described, they don't need to be mutually exclusive from one another, right? Having a partner who's external that can provide expertise, transparency into the market, right? Because I mean, one of the realities is that shippers don't know what they don't know if they're only dealing with their own data. So having a partner who can provide insight into the market can drive cost reduction, drive improvement in customer service, increase kind of command and control, and really provide a competitive edge, right? Without a strategic partner at this point, there becomes the reality of a competitive disadvantage. So that's kind of how we think about the benefits of ATOM, Advanced Transportation Optimization and Management. Tony, Bill, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, while you were describing all of that, I was thinking about the shift that we've had in the carrier networks in just the last year and a half from a pricing advantage and a slight oversupply of transportation capabilities, except around peak, to really a deficit. I mean, the demand is far outstripping the supply. And on the national level, the pricing power is entirely with the carriers. So I don't know what you're seeing as far as contract renegotiations, but I'm going to assume that nobody's getting waivers for any of the heavy surcharges, and really the sweet spot's probably the medium and large size shippers as opposed to the very large super retailers. So this isn't a webinar on how to negotiate your contract best with the carriers, but maybe there's something in the business intelligence that could give you an edge where you can leverage the contracts you have, leverage the carriers that you have for particular things like tipping the decision point on when to throttle back volume with one carrier because you're near the point where you're going to trigger the additional surcharges and things like that. Very real-time analytics. This isn't monthly reports anymore. This is literally like, I need to figure out what to do today, and I need to figure that out this morning. Where is my volume threshold when it triggers the additional volume surcharges? So I'm assuming we can do real-time kind of adjustments to our strategy with something like this and a strategy like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I think there's another good pros who know conversation on this very topic tomorrow on the topic of carrier engagement on this front. But I think you're right that carriers are definitely in the driver's seat in setting the rules. We are seeing that carriers are willing to work with shippers to create a strategic partnership under the right circumstances, right? And I think creating the right circumstances for the carrier and becoming the right kind of shipper who carriers want to work with relies on a shipper understanding their data, right? That creates an advantage in developing a strategic partnership with carriers. And to your point, Bill, in a world where the carriers do dictate the rules and surcharges, it's not out of the realm of possibility that carriers waive surcharges for specific shippers. There's got to be a give and take when that happens. But in a world where shippers are dictating most of the rules, especially if you're not a mega shipper, then being armed with data is really the only way not to be at a complete disadvantage. Because to your point, if you don't understand, when you're going to reach, I mean, it could be as simple as volume tiers, or it could be just understanding which surcharges are avoidable. We have a very recent example of packaging, right? Of an opportunity to move from a poly bag that was being used to a product for a product to a specific box size, just on one specific product, and it cut out $100,000 in cost immediately. So just being able to understand those nuances, right? It enables you to play within the carrier's world, right? If they're setting the rules, at least be able to play the game well. And that's what having data analytics enables you to do.
Yeah, the major takeaway that I have from this slide and from you walking through Adam here, Michael, is really around the control, right? And I think it boils down to flexibility of the control that you have, right? So being able to bring in a secondary list of carriers for the what if of the carrier controlled market for capacity constraints. But really, it's, from a ProShip perspective, a lot of it's been the flexibility of tweaking that rate shop group, tweaking that business rule on the fly in real time through table-driven business rules with our tools from ProShip. I think that's been the biggest takeaway we've seen is you can have the expertise, the partnerships, you have the competitive advantage going your way, but turning on a dime and be able to slice and dice where you make those decisions and tweaks along the way has really been the main focus, I think, from a ProShip implementation standpoint for removing the burden of business rule changes, right? So giving you the flexibility of control for not having to call IT, not having to call your service provider or your vendor to make changes, kind of giving the operation a lot more control over the decision making in real time has been the biggest focus we've seen. And certainly a lot of those business rule changes come through what you find out from analytics, carrier scorecarding, or new surcharges coming from the carriers as well too. So we talked through kind of bringing these all together. I guess could we maybe shift the conversation a little bit to when you are going to look for the right partner and look for the experts in the market, what are some best practices when you go, obviously, to go through a selection process, but also then implement tools to get to the end state as well too? Could you share what Envista works with your customers on as far as the selection process and the kind of the journey to that end state of a kind of connected analytics solution?
Yeah. Before I jump into this, Tony, you kind of got me thinking with the last thing that you just said. You talk about kind of real-time visibility and the ability to be robust with business rules. We had a conversation recently with a mutual Envista and ProShip customer, and really the question that they posed to us, they were coming to us with a business need. They posed this question of saying, hey, can we take the data that we have available to us from ProShip, executed shipment detail, and even before the carrier provides billing detail, can we kind of audit from a business rule perspective to understand whether our routing logic and our business rules in the shipment execution software are having the intended effect? And how quickly can we do that so that we can make tweaks? Can we do it within 24 hours? And I won't get into kind of how that conversation played out, but the point I want to make is this is a rapidly evolving discipline right now of data analytics, and the questions are changing all of the time. And so there are, we are constantly realizing that the possibilities are expanding for how we can use this. And it's always dependent on where a shipper is in their journey, right? If a shipper is at 1.0, then let's work from getting that shipper 1.0 to 2.0 and then to 3.0 and then to 4.0. But once we've got kind of the foundations in place, we can start asking these really interesting creative questions. And so the advantage of having a strategic partner, which is kind of what we're going to talk about in this implementation process slide, the advantage of having a strategic partner is having someone who is working with other shippers who are asking those same questions, right? Because when we at Envista, when we are asked a question like that, then that's immediately a solution that we want to enable for our other customers as well. And so, when it comes to kind of the analytics solutions journey, this is a good framework for kind of what that process looks like. But there are a couple key points, right? So if you think about, I'll just kind of read the 5 here, right? If you think about starting with the shipper side, stakeholders and key resources, moving into finding the right partner and selecting a product, building your strategy, integrating, and then continuous improvement. There's some good tips for you to read in there, and we can obviously leave this as a leave behind. But the key point I want to make here is that steps 1 and 2 are the most critical by far. Step 1 is when a shipper determines, what do we want out of our data analytics and business intelligence journey, right? What are the KPIs that are important to us? What are our current gaps, not only in the spend arena, but in transit activity, in our workforce, manual work that we're doing? What are the gaps? What do we want out of this? And then step number 2, picking the right partner and product, is vital, because once you understand what you want, you need to have a partner who can help you understand what you don't know that you want, but that you need, right? And you want to make sure that creates a holistic partnership, an extension of your team. And then from a product perspective, ensuring that the product truly is business intelligence, not just business information, not just indicators, but real intelligence, not just dashboards, but actionable intelligence. So those are kind of the 2 key points. Everything else kind of flows from there. And I think even the next slide, we'll get into that continuous improvement cycle, but really having that right fit and developing that strategic partnership on the front end. If you pick the right partner, then the strategy and the integration leads to a very smooth onboarding into your data analytics experience, because then the lift is managed by the strategic partner.
Yeah, and in prepping for this session here, I think we touched on a couple of, it's the human aspect, right? That knowledge aspect of the partner, right? What have they done in the past? What similar clients have they worked with as well too? Could you touch on maybe? I think that's what we see from a market perspective. There is a lot of the what we call BYOA, bring your own analytics with the data warehouse versus a true freight audit payment analytics partner here. You touch on, I guess, I think it goes back to the data rich, information poor statement you made earlier as well too, and it also comes to the time to value, right? So I think one of the critical things that we found in working with Envista is the day 1 dashboards. Can you maybe touch on that time to value, the day 1 dashboards, and the prior experience you guys can bring to the table, in the second step, right? Having the right product from day 1.
Right. Sure. So I'll start with the bring your own analytics. So I mean, it's a reality that corporate BI initiatives are the norm. If you're participating in this discussion right now and your company doesn't have a corporate BI initiative, yeah, trust me, it's coming, right? The objective is it's a great one. If I was running a company, I'd have the same objective. I want to get all of my data across all of my disparate systems into one EDW data warehouse, data lake. The challenge for us in the transportation and supply chain space is that when a corporate BI solution is implemented, the first challenge becomes that supply chain and technology is typically a little further down the totem pole in when it's implemented, right? So sales gets implemented, marketing data gets implemented, and then we come to supply chain transportation. And typically either the internal partners who are implementing, or if your company's outsourced it, once they get to transportation, they understand the product really well, right? They understand Tableau or Power BI or Cognos or Click or whatever the solution is. They understand the product, but they don't understand transportation data. So while I would advocate very strongly for every corporation to have this kind of enterprise data warehouse initiative, BYOA, it has to be supplemented with, again, transportation business intelligence. And the idea there being, from a time to value perspective, Tony, you brought it up. I mean, if you're a FedEx shipper and a UPS shipper, Bill, you said earlier, right? All of their data is available today on their own carrier websites. Well, if you select the right partner, that partner already has standard integrations to those carriers. And when you say, yeah, let's go, let's implement this thing, a few days later, all of that data becomes available then in that partner's business intelligence product, right? And so, speaking from experience at Envista, once the data becomes available in our product, now all of a sudden we unleash to you several dozen dashboards that are true intelligence right out of the gate. We call them our day one dashboards, right? So now you've got intelligence available to you that you can take action on, and you don't have to do any lift, right? And in a BYOA solution, all of that is being developed internally, right? Every KPI, every metric, every dashboard, just trying to figure out how to adopt, how to use. You're starting from the ground up every time, even if it's a great tool, like a Tableau, like a Cognos. Those are market leading tools, but they're not going to get you to intelligence, right? It's going to be a long time to move from the journey from information to intelligence.
Great. I think you just touched on kind of the data flow. Could you maybe walk through just the, from a transportation business intelligence, path, if you will, as far as just all the moving parts to close the loop that Envista will do?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite kind of illustrations of how really what we would think of as a fully integrated solution with a shipper works. So when you talk about your data analytics journey as a shipper, pulling together disparate data sources, tying them together, leveraging them for actionable business intelligence, this is what this model has to look like from an integration perspective. So I'll orient you here. Really, top left is a shipper's shipment execution software, TMS, really any source of shipper side data. So it could also be out of an OMS, WMS, you name it, right? Bottom left would represent a shipper's ERP. The middle would represent the business intelligence product, where all of the data is going to live and the business intelligence product will live. And then to the right represents a shipper's carrier network, whether that be entirely small parcel, single sourced, or whether that be a global all modes carrier network. And so from an integration flow perspective, where it really needs to start is with that executed shipment detail. So if you're a ProShip customer, ProShip providing data to the business intelligence product that gives you as a shipper access to all of your executed shipment detail right out of the gate. That's step number one. That's mutually exclusive of the carrier billing detail coming through, which would be step number two, right? And for most shippers today, the BI journey starts with step number two. It's okay, once I've got my carrier billing detail, now the intelligence begins. But there's a gap, obviously, between execution and billing. And so closing that gap, tying together, we would call it a systems integration or an order match at Envista, tying together that data, and then conducting a robust audit to ensure that once the carrier billing detail is available, it's being audited, it's being normalized, cleansed, business rules are being applied, general ledger coding is being applied, and then there's a true round trip integration. You see steps, kind of 5, 6, and 7, where even the payment function and the carrier support is able to be managed by that strategic partner. And then things like month-end accruals are enabled, step number 8. This doesn't even include things like strategic sourcing, right? Contract negotiation, because all of this data then enables really solid strategic sourcing initiatives, further downstream as those activities are engaged. So key takeaway here is most shippers engage in a crawl, walk, run strategy when it comes to these things. And don't be scared if there are things that as a shipper you want to continue to own, right? Having great BI and analytics doesn't mean that you have to outsource your payment solutions, right? As it kind of implies in steps 5, 6, and 7. You don't have to outsource payment, but it's true that a fully integrated solution with a strategic partner would typically include those components.
And I think we touched on in the past, well, too, how do we, tie together, right? I think it's going to come into that real-time integration, right? One thing we talked about around control, business rules, tweaking, adding carriers, tweaking business rules in the earlier slide. I think another component here that we've seen a lot more is tracking. So real-time tracking being fed into the business intelligence tool, right? And not just having that visibility of an on-time delivery or missed shipment, every 2 weeks in a billing cycle as well too. I think that's been pretty critical as well. Just as we wrap here, we got maybe about 5-10 minutes left. I think we really want to just more so highlight, the integration with ProShip and Invista here to end before we take any questions. Really, from a background perspective, ProShip and Vista, what Michael, we've seen each other at trade shows. We've worked with each other on and off at different customers for the better part of 5 to 6 years now. We have now formalized this partnership, and both obviously sales and marketing alignment as well as technical alignment, having that real-time integration with Invista MyShipInfo and ProShip data coming together here. Just as a quick plug for Invista here, could you maybe highlight a little bit more of how MyShipInfo differs from other like BI products or maybe audit tools, audit analytics tools that are out there as well too?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for giving me the stage to do that. Yeah, I mean, so Invista's MyShipInfo product has been around since 2002. We started as a small parcel audit application and grew over the next several years into domestic freight and then eventually an all modes global freight audit application. So one of the areas in which we're a differentiator or we're differentiated is that we truly can handle a shipper's all modes global transportation volume. We're a true outsourced payment provider as well through our partnership with JPMorgan Chase. And then when it comes to an analytics perspective, a data analytics perspective, I mean, I would argue this is really where we shine, because not only do we have what we consider to be the market's leading transportation BI solution, but we pair that with a network analytics service that it's similar to contract management, contract negotiation, and we do that too. But the network analytics is more like an operational audit, right? So not only are we auditing your carrier bills and does the platform enable contract analytics, but there's also that operational health check component where a shipper can really understand through a partnership with the product and an analyst, where are the opportunities to achieve my strategic objectives.
Great.
Yeah, let me just throw in a couple points on this. One of the things that drove us to work so collaboratively together was both of our companies service some of the largest shippers in the entire U.S. Millions of packages a day is no small endeavor to manage. Doing that with multiple DCs, multiple carriers, it's a level of complexity that most companies don't have to face. But out of that grew the necessity for a very tight data collaboration between our companies and the ability to pivot and act upon the data in a very real-time fashion. So a multi-carrier platform like ProShip that's highly integratable to all of the ERPs, WMSs, OMSs, and the three-letter acronyms out there that customers have, and bringing that data in near real time to a tool and to the experts at Invista has proven time and again to be an enormous force multiplier in trying to understand and manage a very complex transportation strategy. So with that, Michael, thank you. We appreciate everything you've done for our customers, and I know they appreciate it even more. And I'm going to give it back to Tony to kind of bring us home, wrap us up, and see if there's any questions sitting in the queue.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, and Michael, thank you for your input here today and thoughts around the subject. I believe we did have one question, and if anybody does have any questions, now would be the time to submit them through the GoToWebinar. But we did have a question from James to you, Michael. You see more shippers asking for cartonization software now versus before the pandemic. maybe touch on cartonization as part of the equation. And Bill and I can certainly touch on how ProShip sees it fitting into the execution side of things as well.
Yeah, noting the time, I'll keep it very brief. I mean, the short answer is yes, absolutely. And it's really the perfect follow-up to the conversation we've just had, because that is a complete outcome of analytics. Once you can understand the impact of dimensional weighting and specifically target that to your products, the box sizes that you're currently using, and then the errors that the carriers will make even in dimensionally weighting, all of that can be tied together, and shippers can make a really robust evaluation on cartonization software. So the short answer is yes, and it's a topic I'd be happy to get into when we have more time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see it all the time, right? With our, out of the box, ProShip's going to provide that dim factor, right? Did it dim out? Do you have the surcharge? Was it a higher build weight, right? So being able to, to see that in real time, then obviously, reconcile with your invoicing is critical as well too. Another question we had was, kind of back to the work streams. How does BI help manage ship from store shipping versus DC shipping? I think we dove into a little bit earlier as far as looking at those workflows, not on the aggregate, but specifically for time and transit costs considerations, and then optimal shipping. But I guess any other thoughts on ship from store versus DC shipping and the BI for each?
Yeah, so I mean, on the front end, that's a great question as well. I mean, on the front end, that decision of ship from store and DC, it really has to be a network evaluation. And then if there is a ship from store solution in place, really an order management system that can allocate the inventory correctly depending on where the inventory has been placed and the optimal strategy. And Envista does have an order management solution that does that. Now, the role of business intelligence in that, the answer is, can business intelligence help with that? Yes, if the product is truly business intelligence and not just business information. The key differentiator being a shipper's got to have the ability within their business intelligence product to do the types of analytics and dissect the data in a way that the shipper can see, their full network by channel, by business division or brand, by fulfillment location. We've got to be able to have all of that information and dissect it. If we can't do those things and we're looking at it in aggregate, then again, it's really business information and it's not going to help with that analysis.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michael. And the interesting thing we've seen this last year as retailers bring on ship from store, and we're just going to bring it home real quick, but when you add 800 stores and less educated personnel that are actually executing the shipments, you get all kinds of compliance things that just go out the window. Your DCs have, labor that is well educated in how to package and ship freight and parcels, and then you throw that into the stores and suddenly you have very small objects in very large boxes. You have all kinds of compliance problems with the packaging that the carriers are complaining about, and other things that you can spot those in the business intelligence. So real quick, we probably have some housekeeping stuff to wrap up. I would like to remind you all that there's a session tomorrow on Converge, which is the ProShip user conference. If you're interested in or thinking about attending that in September in Orlando, please plan to attend that session. We'll do a lot of Q&A and answer questions. It's ProShip's first user conference, and we hope that you will take advantage of it and come there and get some free consulting and free expertise and training on both ProShip and from all of our partners who will be attending, Envista included, of course. Tony, anything else to finish up with?
Really, the last housekeeping thing is, we do have a section of handouts here as well too. So if you would like more information on Envista, on the ProShip Envista connector and integrated solution, there's about 5 handouts here as part of this webinar. Feel free to use that content. And obviously, if you'd like to get a hold of ProShip, you obviously can, or Envista, you can visit our websites, proshipinc.com or envistacorp.com as well too. That's it for now. Thank you guys very much for your attendance and interest in the subject, and thank you, Michael, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you all.